Good morning. Today's verse, if you've been following along in order, might sound a little familiar. We are in the book of Matthew, chapter 13, verse 55, and it says, looking for it on my computer, "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother named Mary? Aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas?" That's verse 55. Now, right before that, Jesus had been teaching and preaching, and he had been working on some parables, and Mark says, now, when Jesus finished these parables, he moved on from there, where he was. Then he came to his hometown and began to teach the people in their synagogue. They were astonished and said, "Where did this man get such wisdom and miraculous powers?" This should start sounding like the verse in Mark chapter 6, verse 4, where Jesus says a prophet is honored everywhere except in his hometown. Matthew is recounting the same story. And so a little bit more detail. When the people looked at Jesus, they didn't see a prophet. They saw the carpenter's son, a common laborer who worked really hard with their hands to do a very difficult job, a menial job, but a commonplace, an everyday laborer. My dad was a construction estimator. So he would bring blueprints home and we'd look at them and study them, and he'd mark them up to see how much wood they needed, how much concrete they would need. And every once in a while, we got to go to a job site and see the people building these houses. Typically, the laborers there were of minority groups. They didn't have a lot of power. They worked really hard for not a lot of money. And society tended to look down on them because they didn't have college degrees. They weren't doctors or famous athletes and stuff like that. So we get a little bit of that same vibe here. Everybody's remembering when Jesus was a teenager and helping Joseph out in the carpenter shop, fulfilling jobs. How did this kid that we grew up with get this amazing knowledge and ability to teach and preach well? And so they took offense. And that's when Jesus says, a prophet isn't honored in his hometown. Now, today, I'm decorating my page with some modern tools. Jesus did not have access to fancy power tools and stuff when he was working in the carpenter shop. He probably had calluses on his hands from holding heavy, not little toy hammers, but heavy hammers for long amounts of time. And the people just weren't impressed. It was like they thought he was putting on airs. By preaching, they thought he was trying to show off or to prove he was better than they were. Now, technically he was, but he didn't take that attitude ever. He always stayed very humble about the fact that he was God. When they list his mom in the scripture, I don't know if you remember the your mama jokes. I think they're still going around today. But if you wanted to talk bad about someone, you would mention their mom. I don't know why that's a thing. That just kind of was. And that seems like that was a similar situation here. They were further discrediting Jesus by mentioning Mary. He wasn't Joseph's son, the carpenter. He was Mary's son. So again, the takeaway from this verse is going to be really similar to the takeaway from the prophet. What is holding us back from recognizing Jesus for the true Son of God? Recognizing Jesus for who he is, why he came, why we needed him to come, and why they're about ready to crucify him. We'll celebrate that in a few days from now. And why he rose from the dead. And it's all that he could build that relationship to bridge that gap between God, the pure, holy, awesome deity that he is, and us, his creation that has chosen to rebel and go in as many different directions as we can think of. So if you do something with your hands today, whether it's the dishes or you make something and it feels boring and not very exalting, that's okay. You're doing important work. And while you're doing that, remember the work that Jesus did, not only as a carpenter's son, but more importantly, the Son of God. All right? Have a good one, and I'll talk with you later. Bye.